Oh, I skipped already. So welcome everyone to the Ready for Disaster, Resilient Communities Through Awareness and Preparedness Against Risks, Fire, Flood and Landslide webinar. Today's webinar will be concentrated and will be centered on climate change and natural disasters. So thank you very much for participating and for having some time for us. Our goals for today is we would like to let you know what we have created and what is available through the Erasmus Plus project from the Ready for Disasters main results. And our main results are a competence map for volunteers and trainers. Of course, we have developed an online course and e-learning material, and we also have now finally available a mobile app with a strategic game for climate change and natural disasters risk reduction. We also like to raise some awareness on this very actual issue, unfortunately. And we would also like to continue to foster collaboration between civil protection organizations, the communities, educational communities, but also public and private offices and people to address climate change and disaster risks and build resilient communities across the EU. So please feel free to intervene or to ask questions in the question and answer session so that we can try to answer or look for also connections on this topic and on this issue. As you all have received an agenda, I am Kylene De Angelis from Training 2000 of VET organization, part of this Erasmus Plus project, which is coordinated by GTU, so Gebze Technical University from Turkey. We today also have the first session about climate change and natural disasters, and Dr. Mark Zebisch from EURAC Research Center from Bolzano, from Bozen, is intervening and will have a presentation, a session on climate change and natural disasters, and he will be presenting a European research which the research center has carried out. Dr. Mark Zebisch is the head of the Center for Climate Change and Transformation, and he has been very kind to participate today and to spread the word on research he and his team is carrying out within Europe and worldwide, I guess. So I will leave a further presentation to him as soon as he will intervene. The next session will be about our main results and main outputs, which have been created within the Ready for Disaster project. And of course, we will show you the availability and where you can find the results, and they will be fully available and free as they are and have been created within the Erasmus Plus project. So I will not spoil further. You will see what has been created. And then within our conclusions, of course, we will have a final question and answer session if there are questions, or if we would like to discuss further follow-up activities and resources together and share different information. So for the moment, I will stop sharing my screen. And I would like to go right away to Dr. Mark Zebisch's intervention and presentation so that we can hear something interesting this morning from Mark. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Kylene. So can you hear me well? Yeah, that's it. So I'm Mark Zebisch from Bolzano, from Italy. So my background is actually more in climate impact and climate risk research, and not so much on resilience. So I think how Kylene presented the talk fits very well. So you will not hear what we can do, but more what's the problem from my side. So I will share my screen and start the presentation. So should see now my screen. Can someone confirm that you see the presentation?
Yes, confirmed.
Okay, perfect, thanks. Good, okay, so maybe let's start with some obvious facts about climate change. So where we are. So what you see here is so all these range of lines are the temperatures globally over the record since 1940, and you see that usually globally the surface temperature is of course cooler in winter because we have more land mass in the northern sphere, so it's higher in summer, and you see that there have been hot years and cold years, but what we see this year is a record which is really above everything which has been ever recorded. So the year until now has been the hottest year on records, and July 22nd was the hottest average temperature over the Earth's surface ever recorded. So just to say, we have not only indications about climate change, but we are really in the middle of climate change, and we see basically every month new records in temperature, but unfortunately also in extreme events, precipitations, like of course the pictures from Valencia showed. So with really incredible amounts of precipitation just in one day. You know, even a bit the background if you followed a bit the news. So of course it's an event which is specific for the Mediterranean region and also specific for Spain. It's related to hot or warm temperatures over the Mediterranean Sea, together with cold temperatures over land. But the warming of the Mediterranean Sea is one of the biggest factor for Southern Europe, which leads to heavy precipitation events, because a warmer sea, like the same effect like with hurricanes, can simply transport more energy, more water can evapotranspirate, and regions which are in the vicinity of the Mediterranean Sea can get much more intense precipitation events. Actually, even our regions, the Southern Alps, is still within this influence of the heavy rains from the Mediterranean Sea, and we also had records in the past. But maybe to move a bit away from Europe just for a moment, and to dive a bit deeper into this question, are we really sure that climate change plays a role in such events? I will show you an example from Pakistan. So they had a very heavy flood in August 2022, which was related to an extremely heavy monsoon event. And here you see already the numbers. So this monsoon event was 3 to 8 times more heavy, or the amount was 3 to 8 times higher than the usual rainfall. Maybe that is really important. Over 33 million people have been affected, over 1,500 people killed, and 1.7 million homes destroyed. So the damage was more than 30 billion US dollars. So we see that climate-related extreme events and catastrophes really are heavily affecting people and are leading to large economic damage. What is interesting that in the last, I would say, 5 years, a new type of climate science emerged, which is called climate change attribution. There is even a network which call themselves World Weather Attribution. They have a website, you can check that, and they are analyzing extreme events of the past and even most recent ones with respect to what is the effect of climate change in these events. And for example, for this specific event, so this flood in August 22, this network could prove that climate change have increased the rainfall intensity of up to 50%. So there is a clear signal that climate change has made this monsoon more intense. So it's not causing the monsoon, because the monsoon in this period is very normal, but the intensity has almost doubled. But of course, it's not always to blame the climate. There are also factors, and if you're in the risk world, you know the terms, so exposure and vulnerability. So that means a lot of people are living in floodplains in Pakistan, particularly poor people. And of course, particularly the poor people living in these floodplains, they cannot afford flood resilient houses. There's no early warning system. So there are a lot of factors besides this extreme climate which are contributing to the impacts and the risks. And maybe that is already one of the main message I would pose today, so that we see stronger impacts of climate change. We see more extreme events, heavy rain, storm, fire, you name it. We see higher impacts, so we can measure that. We can measure the effect of climate change to these events. but we also know that it's not just climate, but it's also non-climatic factors. And the good thing is these one we can reduce. We cannot stop anymore the monsoon getting very intense, but we can help the people not being so vulnerable. We can install early warning systems. We can maybe, or we have even probably to move people out of floodplains, so where they just settled because they didn't find another place. So this example maybe shows already a lot of the key messages which I would like to give here. So this was floods. Maybe just a few other type of hazards. Droughts. So you probably all remember in the same year, in 2022, the record-breaking summer drought, which was, according to the Copernicus service, the worst drought in the last 500 years in Europe. And you see even here by this picture from the Copernicus drought alert system that in August 2022, large parts of Europe were under red alert. It was not only affecting typically the southern parts of Europe, but you see drought alarm, for example, in the United Kingdom, Great Britain, or even in Poland or Germany. And you might remember that in this year we had temperature records in London of 42 degrees, which was really far above every temperature ever recorded there. So that means the other key message here is maybe hazards are getting more intense. So we see new records, but they are also increasing in extent. So they are not only limited to local spots, but we see really large-scale extreme events and related impacts in areas or which maybe even not have been affected before by such events. And again here, world weather attribution, we can prove basically that a drought which in the past would have been a drought with a 500-year return period event is already now under climate change condition as likely that it could happen once every 20 years. So again, droughts have been there in Europe all over the history, but now we are changing the likelihood and the frequency of these droughts from 500-year return period to a 20 years return period due to human-made climate change. Another example, which is maybe more relevant even for your region, so I see a lot of Turkish colleagues here, is forest fires. So this is again a European data set from the Copernicus Emergency Management Service from the same drought and heat wave in August. And what you see here, all these spots are forest fires, which have been reported from satellite data. And again, what you see here is that they are spread all over Europe. Of course, Spain, Italy, Greece, Croatia, and so on, so are very much affected. But again, also England, Germany, Poland. Unfortunately, what we see here in Ukraine is partly even driven by the war in Ukraine. So also forest fires, which are not triggered by climate, are reported here. Yeah, and again, a record, so the second worst year since the start of the forest fire services. The forest fire are an issue. Maybe one hazard which is often overlooked, but is actually the most impactful hazard when we talk about people and not only destruction of infrastructure, and this is heat waves. So what many people do not know that in the year, again, 2022, we're always talking about the same summer. More than 60,000 people died due to the summer heat wave in Europe. And this can be basically calculated just year after the event, because basically the methodology is the same like with COVID, so that you count how many people usually die for example, at the 1st of August, and how many died in this specific year. And then you do even statistics over the year. And so here you see this clear peak of exceedance mortality in Europe, which was driven by the heat wave. And for example, just in Italy, more than 18,000 people have been affected. And of course, it's mainly affecting vulnerable people like elderly people or people with chronic diseases. But nevertheless, it's something where we can do something, so these people don't have to die. So we can, again, invest in early warning. We can provide cool spaces. So there's a lot you can do, particularly with heat-related mortality. This is really nothing which has to happen. So we can also prevent that and respond to that. Maybe a few pictures from my home region here in South Tyrol in the European Alps, just to show you how much we have to talk not only about single events, so single hazards, but multiple hazards, chain of hazards, even over years. So our region has been affected by really a large storm which destroyed huge patches of forest in October 2018. Then we had similar events just a bit later in November 2019 and 2020, so which led to large areas of forest being damaged. So then we had the drought in 2022, which led, together with the damage which was already there before, to a very serious bark beetle attack, which is actually still continuing and affected more than 10,000 hectares of forest, so which is about 5% of the forest area here in South Tyrol. So this is a domino effect. The first, the storm, so then heavy snow load, also due to warm Mediterranean Sea, then heat and drought, then bark beetle. And that is how many forests look like now in South Tyrol. So here, you see here all the affected, basically killed trees. And this is the last part of the domino effect, if you want so, because here you see roads, critical infrastructure, electric grid, and usually this is protection forest. So that means it protects the road and the electric network from landslides, from avalanches, from rock falls. And you can imagine if these trees, they have to be removed or they even collapse, so that you have much less protection of the critical infrastructure beneath. So most important here, the message is that climate change is often leading to domino effects, which are not only related to one hazard, like a drought, but to a sequence of hazards, compound hazards, cascading hazards, which might then even not only have an effect on one system, like the forest, but also to other systems, like in this case, the critical infrastructure. Yeah, so to summarize a bit, there is a new report, the brand new, you see, it's from 14th of October this year by the European Environmental Agency, which estimates that weather and climate-related extremes cause economic losses in Europe of 738 billion euro in the last basically 40 years, so which is an enormous amount. And if we look to the statistics, so this is the reported damage in billion of euro. So first you see the increase, and you also might see, if we look to the hazards which are triggering these type of damages, so that, for example, the year 2022, so this year, was basically the first year where heat waves played the major role in damage. So that is maybe also a new thing we have to consider. I'm not from civil protection, but we are closely working together with these people, and at least in our region, so they are focusing mainly on floods. So they have very good flood protection and hazard maps and everything. But for example, storms and heat waves are simply new type of hazards for them. So they have no hazard zone maps for storms or no intervention plans for heat waves until now. I mean, now they have early warning systems, but that's maybe also important to be aware of. So first, hazards are increasing, the damages and losses are increasing, and we even see, let's say, new type of hazards like the heat waves or the storms, which might not have been relevant, at least not for all regions. Okay, so that's a bit the current picture. The most important is, until now, we didn't even speak about the future. We just spoke about what happened in the past and about trends we can observe. And so if we look into the future, so we know, of course, we don't know the future exactly, but we have the climate scenarios, we have the IPCC report, and you know that currently, I mean, this is the data from the last IPCC report, we are at 1.1 degree. Actually, in reality, we already saw the last years even close or above 1.5 degree. So that means we are already one step further. And these are the scenarios from the latest IPCC report for the global level, which show us a bit what could happen in future. Maybe let's start first with the bad news. So the bad news is that there is, in any case, so there is no chance to stop climate change or even to go back to the climate we had 20 years or 40 years ago. So within the next 100 years, we will not manage to keep the climate stable or go back to the climate we are used to. So that is the bad message. The good message is that we have a lot of leeway. And so how climate will develop depends very much on how much emissions we produce. And under the scenario of very low emissions, the global climate change or the global warming is expected to basically stop at 1.4 degree. If we basically continue as we do, so we are at this high emission range where globally this would mean about 4.4 degree above the pre-industrial age. So currently, this is where we're heading to. So if we believe that all the current reduction targets, so that means the promises countries did in the scope of the Paris Agreement, so to reduce the emission, we would end here at plus 2.5 to 3 degree. You remember that the Paris target, so where countries agreed to limit temperatures right below 2 degree and best at 1.5, so is far away. So that means actually we are heading to temperatures which would really be problematic. We have to say that. So we are 2.5 to 3 degree. If you look to these catastrophes which I showed before, which are happening under a 1.1 or 1.2 degree world, would really multiply. And there is a bit of a further warning, which is something which is for some of these effects quite far in the future, but we just have to be aware so that we should definitely not cross these 2 degree global warming level, because maybe you have heard about these tipping points. So tipping points are basically elements in the system. When you reach a certain level of warming, you cannot turn them back. For example, a Greenland ice shield is a good example. So in Greenland, there is an ice shield which is 1,000 meters and higher. So with climate change, this ice sheet is melting because it's getting into warmer temperature. It's even melting faster. And if we go beyond a certain threshold, we cannot stop that anymore. So it's like taking an ice cube out of the fridge, and just these ice shield melt would let the sea level rise by 7 meters. So just to make you aware, so why should we not go above the 1.5 to 2 degree? Okay, so that's a bit about climate change and the relation to the current hazards. Maybe I don't want to show all the slides. Actually, this would be too much, but maybe what could be interesting for you, and that's really the work we do, is so basically how to assess these climate risks, how to include them even maybe in your risk planning on the civil protection level, because there we have developed a set of tools and methods for climate risk assessment, which I just quickly want to share some slides, and then maybe we can even go into the discussion. By the way, this is an example from the flood in Germany, 2018, where 180 people were killed. Also here, the hazard was extreme, so the precipitation was extreme, but honestly here the German civil protection really failed. So there were people were while people were dying upstream, downstream there was still no warning, and people were thinking, okay, so maybe if I move my car a bit away, so that will be enough. And then 2 hours later, the flood hit the regions downstream. So that was really a catastrophe also from the management perspective. So the questions I think we have to ask us today as risk managers are, so what are the potential adverse effects of climate extremes and climate change in our region? So then really the protection targets, so what drives climate risk? And here it's important to focus also on the non-climatic risk drivers. So you don't have to be a climate scientist, but you have to understand what makes your system vulnerable or exposed. Then not only to look on single risks, but how risks are cascading through and across system, to check if you have specific vulnerable groups or vulnerable systems, critical infrastructure, and really to stress test a bit your current risk management. So to ask yourself, okay, so I'm prepared for something I know from the past, for 100-year return period events, but how would I be prepared, or how am I prepared if these events increase their intensity by 30% or by 50%? I think this type of considerations we have to do today in the risk management, in the disaster risk management. And of course, as the main goal, how can we reduce these climate-related risks? So maybe one thing which could worth checking if you're interested, you find it in the internet. So this is something, the two documents here have been developed by us. So there is a UNDIR technical guidance on the comprehensive risk assessment and planning in the context of climate change. And there is the climate risk source book, which we developed as EURAC research for the German developing aid organization. And there is the first European climate risk assessment called EURAC, which has been conducted by the European Environmental Agency, where we developed the method behind. So if you're interested for more information, I would invite you to check out these documents. But I will just show a few more slides, and maybe then we also have some time for a discussion. Yeah, maybe, I guess, as risk managers, you know these figure. I just turned it around a bit. So it's the common approach risk managers work with. So saying risk is a function of hazard, but also exposure and vulnerability. So we use this concept, make it a bit more, let's say, systemic, and not just like this propeller, but trying to understand a bit more in detail how things are related. And I will show you later one example developed for each case which we assess, where we assess climate risk, so-called impact chains. But maybe one thing before I show you an impact chain, and I think then I should stop to leave some room for discussion. I mean, when we talk about hazard, so this is a figure from this climate risk source book and from the UNDIR definition of hazard types. So when we talk about climate-related hazards, so they are the one which we know, the extreme heat, extreme precipitation, storms, storm surges, ocean heat waves in different speeds. They are actually, let's say, complemented by slow onset processes. And this is what climate change originally is about. So that there are increasing temperatures. There's, for example, decrease in snow cover and permafrost. There's rising sea level. So that is what we are used to talk when we talk about climate change. But actually, this general climate change is simply heavily affecting the magnitude, the duration, and the frequency of these climate-related hazards. So increasing temperatures lead to more heat waves. So increasing temperatures even can increase extreme precipitations, as we have seen in this case in Spain. And all of that is related to the other hazards you still have to manage, so like earthquakes, landslides, tsunamis, and so on. And there's even a relation, because some of these extreme climate events can trigger other hazards, like extreme precipitation events can trigger landslides. Sometimes these other hazards are underlying risk drivers for the climate-related ones. For example, if I have deforestation and I have an extreme precipitation, I will have less retention capacity, natural retention capacity, and the effect of my extreme precipitation will be worse if it hits the region which is deforested. And then we have even these compound events, so things which could happen together. So for example, it could be that we first have an earthquake and then we have an extreme precipitation, and then the effect of landslides which are triggered by this earthquake might be much, much worse. So this is more maybe to invite you to think a bit more complex and also about linkages between different hazard types when you're doing risk analysis and assessments. And maybe now the last thing I wanted to show, and then maybe we can go into a discussion, is how we bring all these concepts then into a kind of systemic and conceptual model context. So this is a concrete case, so where we were looking on drought-related risks in Central Asia. So we have a lot of climate-related hazards. So we have water scarcity due to decreased snow cover and less meltwater. We have increasing droughts, increasing heat waves, increasing rain events. And they are first affecting grasslands. So for example, they lead to soil erosion, to soil moisture deficit. In agriculture, they lead to less water for irrigation. This together leads to crop failure due to drought, but also to damage to grasslands. So now we're still on the ecosystem level. So then in Central Asia, you have a lot of farmers which depend on livestock. So if there's not enough crop yield, so they are missing winter fodder for the livestock. If the grasslands are damaged due to drought, they have not enough summer fodder for the livestock. So that means they will lose livestock. Livestock will die or at least be in a bad health status, which is then finally leading to a loss of income. So this is what we mean by impact chain. So you see there is a hazard on top, and it's triggering then a whole chain of impacts. And until now, we have not considered one component. So these are the exposed systems. So this is the hazard. What is missing is vulnerability. And that is important because vulnerability is something where we can do something against. For example, the risk of crop failure due to drought is not only triggered by the drought itself, but also by inappropriate irrigation infrastructure and water management. So their pipes are broken, so there is no one responsible, and that is another reason why you have crop failures, not only the drought. For example, in the case of grasslands, there is overgrazing because they use their livestock also as an investment. So they put too many livestock on the grasslands. The land is degraded, which again leads to missing summer fodder for livestock and in the end, loss of income. We have, for example, inappropriate pasture management, or we have even missing options for alternative income. So these are all factors we have to take into account. And now, so that's then I really stop. This is important because you cannot mitigate the risk here. We cannot anymore prevent heavy rain events in this region. At least the people living there cannot do that. But what we can do, we can reduce vulnerability. For example, we can prevent overgrazing by improving pasture management, or we can prevent the loss of income by providing alternative sources of income, or we can prevent crop failure due to drought by reduce water loss in irrigation. And that's a bit the general idea of this concept, so that we take the hazard as given. We know it's getting more intense due to climate change. We do a systematic analysis of the system with regard to exposed systems, to cascading impacts, and due to vulnerability factors. And then we check, okay, how can we improve that? And yeah, maybe let me stop here because I would also be curious to hear a bit your questions and your impressions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. It was very interesting. Are there any questions? Does anyone want to ask any question? Well,
maybe,
I have
maybe can you hear me, Colin?
yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I think one of our objectives in this project, in Ready for Disasters project, was to create awareness and also to motivate the public to deal with different stages of disasters. You showed actually the extent of the damages around the world. And as we can see them, it's not only at the level that government can deal with all aspects. I think everybody should put some support to those efforts. And again, within this project, we deal with mitigation and preparedness and response, recovery, all stages of disaster. My question to you, you mentioned actually some civil efforts also in your presentation. Do you give particular importance to a particular element of those disasters? I mean, for example, mitigation and preparedness is one element, let's say. Recovery is another, response is another.
No,
maybe which one will have more effect, let's say, in short term and long term, according to your view?
Okay, I mean, I think as always, so the biggest effect would be on the prevention side, so mitigation side, if you want. So maybe what we do here on the local level, so we work together with the civil protection, and we are just having a project where we, together with them, first identified key climate risks, and then we are really going through these 4 phases of risk management, phase by phase, you know, so preparedness, response, recovery. And we really, together with them, do a kind of stress test and asking, okay, so how much is your current system of prevention prepared to extreme precipitation events which go 30% beyond what you have seen? And then, of course, we see, okay, the hazard zone planning is not prepared for it. Maybe the retention basins are not prepared for that, you know, so you can, I think prevention is always the most important phase, but you could really systematically go phase by phase. So then on the response side, of course, this is probably where all the first responders and the volunteers are required. So the question is, okay, have we trained the first responders, for example, for new hazards like heat waves, you know? So are the people from the Red Cross, do they have training how to help people which are dehydrated, or did we miss that because it never happened in our region? And of course, the recovery phase is also very important, because imagine, and that is what happens now in Germany, after a flood, you try to build everything back as it was, and the houses will be at the same location as they are before. So that is definitely a mistake. So, so you have definitely also to, and already now in your strategies for recovery, you have to include these build back better principle, so that you're not recovering as it was, but that you build things in a better way, and you maybe respect hazard zones which are extending, if you talk about floods. Yeah, so in that sense, I would say prevention is most important, because there we have time, you know, so we have time now to for example, extend the areas for which are flood protected, or to increase the retention capacity of the landscape. Or to improve the protection of forests, because we know that it protects us from landslide hazards and so on. So for me, prevention is the most important phase. But just to say, I think it's good to cross these 2 concepts, so climate risks and the 4 risk management phase, to use it really like in a stress test, and simply go through each of these phases for each hazard type and check, are we prepared? Do we have the tools to prevent? Do we have are our current plans to respond to risks capable for increased intensity of hazards? Yeah, and recovery, as I said, build back better and not as it was.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark.
I have one question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So you mentioned, for example, overgrazing, and that is something I imagine that it cannot be easily controlled, right? Because now it goes to the private individuals to also fulfill something which would be beneficial for everybody. So how would we deal with people who are unwilling themselves to, for example, have less livestock just because they are focused on short-term profit? So how would be a good way to deal with those kind of people? Because I imagine there's a lot of them.
Yeah, it's a good question, but it depends a bit on your country, I would say. So for example, in Central Asia, there are committees for pasture management, so where the farmers are a member. And so these committees have not 100% power, but they have a bit of power to let's say, introduce pasture management measures. So that is one a possibility to really include rules and even limit the number of livestock per hectare, for example, so which is very common in Europe. So you have regulations which are limiting so for example, one cow per hectare. So that is the standard of the European agriculture policy. But of course, you can also work with incentives, because I think if the farmer understands that they are damaging their grasslands, so they will, and you have good recommendations. For example, pasture management can simply mean that you place in a clever manner your water sources. Often the overgrazing is even due to the fact that the animals are moving around a lot because water sources are at one spot and grazing is at another spot. So they're really even, let's say, simply clever management measures, which are beneficial even for the farmers themselves. So I think it's always a bit of a mixture. So to improve management in a way that everyone benefits, and then of course it needs rules. But in most of the countries, I mean, even in Central Asia, the mechanisms are there. So then the question is how much the rules are implemented.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Mark. I have a question.
Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I understand that very soon there is going to be a COP29 somewhere. Do you think these type of problems should be faced during the COP29? Like countries should negotiate and agree on the different steps to take, because otherwise, I mean, I think in Europe we are very much concerned about climate control and so on, heat reduction and so on, while in China are more concerned about the economic impact. So how to face the different interpretation, I would say, of the process?
Yeah, maybe let's put it like that. So I'm not in climate policies, but maybe let's put it so maybe we can first say that in the Paris Protocol, climate mitigate or the climate neutrality, so the mitigation of emissions and climate change adaptation is equally important. So that's maybe one thing. And of course, the responsibility of climate mitigation lies with the industrial countries, including China. I mean, China itself is actually heavily affected by climate impact. So it's not that they don't do nothing. So, I mean, they increase the emissions, but now they're about at the level of Europe if you talk about tons per person, not about total amounts. So that means they simply have reached our level if you talk about emission per person, which is in a way fair, because that is what we did and what we are still doing. So I think China will reduce, or they even promise to reduce their emissions. Of course, they don't want to get orders from anyone. But since they have seen massive floods, droughts, and so on, they are also massively transforming their system. I mean, they are the country with the highest percentage of electro cars, of solar panels, and so on. So it's not that they are just the dirty country. In many fields, they're even more innovative and ahead of Europe. For example, e-mobility. So that's one thing. And I think the other thing is that you simply have to accept, and that is, I think, your field, so that climate change will go on and we will exceed the 1.5 degree. And that is where adaptation comes in. And that's something where you can do something as risk managers. So we simply have to accept if you want it or not, so that climate extremes will get more intense, and to prepare our countries and regions and societies for that. I think that's the only thing we can do. So the rest is a bit more on the policy level where we can hope for something or not. But from a risk management perspective, we should face the risk. So the only thing I can say.
Thank you very much.
Hi, sorry, can
Senna?
I ask something? Right, hello. If it's okay, I want to ask something.
Yeah, please, yeah.
You showed us a map of, the different places that climate change affected. And, in addition to those, there are migrations of animals and, all of the things in conclusion that climate change affects. So in the last few weeks, NASA actually shared a map, or rather, yes, a map that the ozone layer has started to heal in the last 2 decades, because it was damaged a lot before with the the Industrial Revolution and all that, and the ozone layer's damage is really it really affects climate change. So since it's recovering, do you think that these climate change results, do you think that they will change, or do you think that they're irreversible? Do you think that we can stop them?
No, unfortunately not, because there is no. I mean, there's a bit of relationship between the ozone layer hole and climate change, but not a lot, because the ozone layer has been more affected by these fluor chemicals which have been used for fridges, cooling systems, and so on. So it was really easy to ban them, and they are also greenhouse gases, but not the most important one. So while the climate change effect we see now is mainly driven by CO2, which is mainly to 80% related to burning fossil fuel, so oil, coal, gas, and that is simply much more difficult to ban. So these I don't know the English word, so these chlorides which have banned for in Montreal Protocol to protect the ozone layer. So that was easy to ban because they were even not needed at that time anymore. So they simply could be replaced by other chemicals for cooling. But CO2 comes from fossil fuel, and we are really far away from replacing fossil fuel. I mean, we see a tremendous extension of renewable energies in many countries, but the extraction of oil and gas is still increasing at the same moment. So that means it's great that the ozone layer and the healing of the ozone layer is maybe a great example of what we can achieve if countries stay together. But unfortunately, the ozone layer is more affecting the UV radiation hitting the Earth and not the warming. So this is not related. So it will not contribute to reducing climate change.
Okay, thank you very much.
Please, Monica.
Hello, I'm Monica Rivas. I work in Lluvias Sólidas. It's an NGO in Valencia. Based on what we have experienced with this recent data, I have a question. What are some effective ways to get policymakers to understand the urgency of risk prevention, or which strategies can we take to sensibilize our politicians in order to understand these kind of topics, because we know that we are crossing a lot of or experiencing more and more extreme weather events in order to formulate projects or in that way to sensibilize our authorities?
No, that's a good question. I mean, I fear, unfortunately, one good way is exactly what happened now in Valencia, so that there are events. I mean, usually after an event, authorities get much more active, which is very sad than without such events. But of course, that doesn't need an event. So that shouldn't be an event which hits your area, but simply by showing statistics. So as I did in my presentation, and even evidence that climate change is contributing to intensify these events. And I think that's already important. And maybe one thing which is for me very important and not so common is really to talk to risk managers, because often climate change and climate change adaptation is often the responsibility of different authorities than disaster risk reduction. So often disaster risk reduction is dealing with floods, droughts, fires, whatever, traffic accidents, and climate change is often with the environmental agencies. So they are then responsible for adaptation, and they give quite general strategies. And I think most important is to bring these two type of policymakers or decision makers together and saying, so look, we have to integrate climate change into our disaster risk management, because our current approach, how we assess risk and how they manage, is not sufficient anymore. So the current risk management approach is based on the assumptions that we are living in stable conditions, so we can calculate statistics of return periods of events, and then we prepare ourselves for this type of events. But in reality, as we see with the Dana event in Valencia, climate change is changing the intensity of these events. And this is why you have to adapt your disaster risk management. And I think this is for me the most effective manner. And my feeling is talking to our civil protection people so they understand, because they are professionals and they are used to deal with return periods and intensities, and even these exposure vulnerability hazard approach is very common for them. But what is not common for them is to think, what is the effect of climate change on these systems? And yeah, I think that simply means really going to them, maybe taking, for example, something like the EURAC reports or these European climate risk assessment, and really trying to convince them with projects to go through all the phases of risk management, as we discussed with Selçuk, and consider also vulnerabilities. I mean, this is related to soil sealing and so on. Yeah, that would be for me most effective. And I have the feeling people are now aware, that's then just how to take action. And this is sometimes hard, because it would, for example, mean to change land use planning, so not allow buildings to be built in certain regions, or even to reduce soil sealing. So that means to remove parking lots and allow the rain to penetrate the soil. So there are some measures which could be effective, particularly to prevent flooding. But this would mean really to change also the system and not just build higher dams and dikes. So to make it short, I think what has not yet happened now is that climate change effects are considered in disaster risk management. Disaster risk management is usually very professional, but very static when it comes to their mechanisms and tools. So I can maybe take one more question, and then I would need to go to another meeting.
Any more questions? No. Okay, thank you very much, Mark. It was very interesting, and thank you also for the questions. I think that they have given us an overall overview also on what we as risk managers, but also risk civil protection volunteers or operators working in the area can do, and what we can do further. I think there's a lot of work still to be done also from your presentation, as we have understood that everything, well, we already know that everything is evolving and also our risks are evolving. So we need to continue to evolve on our skills. So I would like to leave the floor to Selçuk Toprak, Professor Selçuk Toprak, who will be presenting the first result of the Ready for Disaster project. Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks again.
Bye.
Thanks again. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, Mark, for being with us.
Selçuk, are you sharing your screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you see my screen clearly?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would like to welcome everybody again to this webinar organized as part of Ready for Disasters project. And within this project, actually, we have several partners contributing to different stages. Let me get into presentation mode. Is it still clear? No problem, I think. Okay. Well, we are the promoter and we have some other partner organizations here. Training 2000 from Italy and LARES are the two organizations from Italy, and from Turkey, AFAD and Kocaeli Metropolitan Municipality Fire Department are the partners within this project. From Greece, Oikopolis, and from Georgia, DGWA. And the project was funded by European Union and Turkish National Agency, and we also appreciate those efforts. Kailin already mentioned the products of the project: competence map, training modules, and open educational platform with interactive mobile application and game. Today, we will be covering actually all those topics one by one. So I'll start with competence path planning tool for volunteers. It is one of the primary component here, which actually lead to door to the other products, which are the modules, training platform, and then the game. As part of this competence path planning tool, we first need to identify the needs, the competences, the skills necessary for volunteers to deal with disasters. So we started with those activity of national survey. Within each country, actually, we did the survey: Italy, Turkey, Greece, and Georgia. And the main purpose was actually eventually to develop a comprehensive resource designed to prepare volunteers for effective disaster management. And it is developed across countries that I already mentioned, based on insights from experienced volunteers and trainers across all those countries. And we focused on particular natural disasters here: fire, flood, and landslide scenarios. And within that initial survey, we involved about 160 experienced volunteers, I can say. And performing this survey, what we got, we identified learning needs, understand specific skills and gaps among volunteers, and then we develop targeted training. So those training modules are actually crafted to address identified gaps, providing comprehensive disaster preparedness training, including competences. And then we also wanted to enhance volunteer preparedness here. So we build confidence and competence for responding to disaster scenarios. So eventually, the ultimate goal is to establish a resilient volunteer force capable of managing disasters effectively across different scenarios. So it is a comprehensive survey. We prepared an international report as part of this survey, and we actually identified all those 14 key competences areas. And you can see actually those key competences areas and also underlying, let's say, sub-competences. It is a long list. I'm not going through it. It is available at our website. But eventually, all those training modules, platform, and games actually based on those competences. We were trying to develop those competences according to the survey and needs that we performed. And as I mentioned, there are key competence areas and then sub-competences for each area. And there are actually, this brought us to learning pathways so that we can create a clear structure which ensures volunteers build practical skills at each phase of training. And as part of that, in a moment, actually, Sarah will mention training modules, and you see those training modules are designed in essence to respond to those competences. So when we prepare the text, those competences were in our mind. So this so that the volunteers actually can be prepared for the disasters in a sense. Here the training paths that those competences brought us. So within that actually training path, we consider mitigation and preparedness, response and recovery with respect to 3 disasters, flood, landslides, and fire. So each one took us to a competence wheel which provides a link to the competences we already determined. So as we are going to talk about those training modules and learning pathways in detail, I'll just mention here, it is in a sense very flexible training path, which you can follow yourself in a structured way to get the competences that I mentioned in the beginning. So here, actually, maybe in short, I can mention some impacts on disaster preparedness. By defining and developing those essential competences, the tool builds a skilled and prepared volunteer base. We have multilingual, mobile-friendly, and adaptable for diverse learning preferences. And also, it leads us to the future goals where we have enhanced accessibility further and continue adapting content to meet evolving disaster management needs and expand reach to build resilience within communities worldwide. You know, we have already partners within this project that deals with volunteers, and I am sure those future goals will be achieved through them because, disasters are already here. And as we listened from the Mark's presentation, actually there are serious consequences of those climate changes, and we should be ready for them actually. And we believe that our project Ready for Disaster will contribute to develop a solution or to reduce the effect of those disasters to our community. Well, I will stop here, and you can reach actually almost all of the information at our project website, and all the links to the platform and games can be found there. And I think today we will hear interesting and exciting information about those opportunities that you can get going through those training materials and those educational materials. They actually kind of, I should say, prepared or structured directly to include those elements of disaster which deals with mitigation and preparedness, let's say, response and recovery stages. So basically, actually, we are covering all those stages which are critical to get ready for the disasters. I would like to thank all of you also, for attending this webinar, and I would like to inform you that there will be a second webinar in December, and I ask you to invite your friends and colleagues to that second webinar as well at that time. Thank you for your attention. Halin, floor is yours.
Thank you, Selçuk. You have taken part of my conclusion, but anyway, I would like to give the floor now to Sarah, who will be presenting one of the three main results, and which is the training platform, OER, and case studies, which I believe is, as Professor Toprak was mentioning, quite interesting to see what has been developed and what can be used on behalf of the general public and people interested in developing their skills and knowledge. Sarah?
Hi, hello. Yes, the second result of the Ready for Disaster project is our 8 training modules and OERs. When we say OERs, we say we intend open educational resources, which can be used and modified by anyone, and these modules are which have been created by the Ready for Disaster partners have been created and implemented on an e-learning platform, which can be accessed via the project website. Yes, we have 8 training modules which have been divided into several units, learning units, which have been aligned to the competence map and competencies already mentioned by Professor Toprak. The 8 training modules are occurrence and impact of disasters, flood disasters, landslide disasters, fire-related disasters, rescue and rescue equipment for the 3 type of natural disasters, promoting prevention over recovery, resiliency metrics and indicators, and the EU civil protection mechanism. These training modules and OERs have been created to engage with learners, with civil protection volunteers, trainers, and anyone interested in the topics of the Ready for Disaster project, and follow the same structures. We have created interactive presentation with quizzes, images, videos, and external links, a final self-assessment test to reinforce learning and knowledge acquired learning, and a final document which we have called, which are basically chapters that offer more detailed information about the module's topics. We will see it in a minute, what we mean by that. Yes, these training modules can be accessed via the project website, as I said, and no registration is required. There's an interactive wheel for the training modules, and we will see it now. Obviously, each training module, every training material is available in English, Turkish, Italian, Greek, and Georgian. And for each disaster, we have 3 phases of the disaster management. So, for example, for the flood disaster, we have mitigation and preparedness, response, and recovery. So, for example, Unit 1 of Module 1 can be accessed via the project website and via the interactive wheel. And this is what the learner will see. So, learning outcomes available. Okay. Sorry. Just a minute. Can you see my screen? Okay. So this is the interactive presentation that I mentioned before, which follow the same structure in each training module. So we have, for example, module 1, occurrence and impact of disaster. Unit 1, occurrence and impact of flood. You will have the learning outcomes, so what the learner will be able to know and to do, and its attitude at the end of this unit. And then you have the training material itself with images and also interactive quizzes. This is an example. And as I said before, a final self-assessment test. So by clicking here, you will have the final self-assessment test, which have been formed by 4 to 5 questions. Yes, so this is a way of seeing the training modules and accessing the training modules, but also learners can access each training module via via the project website and a more traditional table with links. And about the chapters, as was shown before, sorry again. The chapters can be accessed via the project website and can be downloaded and read whenever the learner wants. About each training module, we have also selected some case studies that offer insight from real-world disasters. Some example of these case studies are the floods in the Emilia-Romagna region in Italy, which occurred last year. Also, wildfire in the Attica region in Greece have been selected and described in the training module and open educational resources. And also the landslide in Kocaeli in Turkey. Yes, this have been selected and curated by the Ready for Disaster partners to provide opportunities for learners to learn from past events and also to develop the mentioned skills related to the competence map. Okay. It is, I think,
Okay, so thank you very much, Sarah. I think that there have been a few problems in seeing the, the slides and the website. However, we will send you the presentations, and I would like to share my screen just to show you again. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so while accessing the project website, which is ready4disasters.gtu.edu.tr, and clicking on project products, intellectual outputs, we can all access what Professor Toprak has described beforehand, the competence map. Then we have access to the educational, open educational platform by clicking on the wheel. You are able to access all the modules and all the units we have, which Sarah has just illustrated. You can access also the material through a more simple chart and the traditional way. So it is by clicking here, you can access a simple table. If you do not like wheels or colors or whatever, you can see and the material through simple text. I hope it's okay. It's just a bit slow. So you can see below there are modules with simple text and the name of the units. And by clicking on the unit, you can again access the training material. And then going back to the main page, you can click on the training modules, and then we also have access to the interactive mobile app and game, which I will leave to describe and to show you by Professor Iya Mosashvili from DigiWay, Georgia.
Hello, everybody. We just want to show you the mobile game directly. This is the result of our digital thinking. So Vasily is here, who is our game developer, and Vasily.
Sure, I will share my screen and I'll show you the game. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Clear.
So I'll show you it through the computer, even though it's a mobile game, just for sake of the presentation. So in the beginning, when you open the game, there are several options here. First of all, of course, the logos that supported this project. If you click on play, you will be directed to the scenario selection screen where you can basically select which scenario you want to play. And each scenario has 3 different levels. In the beginning, only one level is unlocked, and you have to play that level fully to go to the next one, so you don't miss everything that you're supposed to know. There is an option screen here as well, where you can change your controller type to 2 different schemes, and also change the language, which is already fully functional, so you can change to any other language and play it in your desired language. If you press on the guide, it will take you to the guide document, which is here. And in the guide document, everything is described. So for example, the controller scheme, as you can see in here, is the first one, the joystick one. You have 2 different joysticks. One controls your movement and the second one controls your camera. And the gamepad type is not a joystick, it's just buttons. It's simplified for people that might have difficulty controlling with the first scheme. And in here you can just go forward, backwards, and turn around with these buttons. Preferably on the phone, it will look like this. And the control scheme, you would be able holding it in your hand and basically controlling with your thumbs, and you will be able to move around fast with both thumbs, because you can look around and move at the same time in any direction you want. Currently I have to do it with a mouse, which will be slightly slower. So let's just I will quickly go through some of the levels. When you click on each level, you will see the description. You will see your previous achieved points and the time which took you to complete the level. And there are certain requirements for each level that you will have to satisfy in order to move on to the next level. So for example, the fire scenario first level is in the office of your building. In the IT room, there starts a large fire, and because the fire is too large to intervene, you have to evacuate the building. And during the gameplay, you will have different tasks. So of course, movement. You can interact with objects, and it will be you will know that with this hand icon which objects you can interact with. And you will have also this quiz section which asks you to answer correctly. You can also, of course, answer incorrectly, and it will show on your points. You will not get enough points, for example, to move on to the next level if you don't have enough correct answers. So in this case, there's also a time limit here because you have to evacuate quickly and you have to take the correct steps. So yes, you have to walk with controlled fast steps. You have to trigger the fire alarm in this case. We can interact also with the fire alarm, go close to it and actually interact with it. Turn off electricity and gas, and in the same way interact with that. Once we move around, we also can see that smoke will start to fill the room and we have to crouch. And in the case we don't crouch, we will know that, so the smoke will be at the level of our face. So it will be much harder to see. And if we follow the emergency signs, we know that we have to move left towards the emergency exit, which is the fire escape route. And after that, we will be asked some questions about the assembly area. And in here, yes, we go to assembly area, we write name to the officer and call the appropriate number. In this case, we failed because the time limit is only 1 minute. So you have to do all of that quite fast. But once you do it within 1 minute and you answer all of the questions correctly, you can go to the second level and just advance in that way through all of the levels in the scenario. Now, if there are any difficulties or questions in the guide document, there are chapters for each of the level. So fire scenario 1, 2, 3, and so on for each of the scenarios. And all of the correct answers are marked, and what you have to do is shown with arrows. So if somebody, for example, played through a level and they don't know what questions they answered incorrectly, they can go through the guide document and everything will be listed in there, how you can complete the game fully. So in this case, I'll just showcase some of the environments that we have, some of the animations and environments that we have. In this case, we can see that the fire is smaller, so we can respond to it. And within the response, we have to announce the fire and trigger the fire alarm, first of all, so we can let everybody know that there is a fire. Turn off electricity and gas. And in here, we have access to different types of extinguishers, and we have to choose the correct one. In this case, it was an electrical fire, so we can choose the gas extinguisher and just go and extinguish the fire. And we'll be asked questions. So how close should you stand? What is the order of operation of the fire extinguisher and so on? I'll just quickly go through them. In this case, we know that, okay, pulling the pin, aiming, and then so on. We have to open the windows. And after we're finished, we also have to evacuate because we cannot get back to work after such an emergency scenario. And there are more tasks in here. So yes, we can see a paper trash burning. So we can use the hose cabinet in here and get the fire nozzle and extinguish the fire. And once we're done doing that, we can continue with the evacuation where we see a person running towards us who's on fire, and we can help him by rolling him on the ground and then covering him with a fire blanket and using the firefighter method to drag him outside towards the assembly area, where we're also going to be asked similar questions. In this case, we get fully completed, and you can continue either by pressing this button and go straight to the next level, or you could go back to the main menu and just read the description as well of the next level. In this case, you will be playing as a volunteer, and you have to put out 2 fires and rescue 4 people, and there's a time limit because you will have to be wearing a mask with oxygen. And because the oxygen supply is limited, there's a time limit associated with it. So you choose the equipment that you want. You in this scenario, there's it's slightly more complicated, so I'll just show a layout from the top view. If you go to the fire level in here, there is first floor of the office, there is a second floor of the office, and there's also a warehouse, and this is the top-down view of everything. So I'll just make it a little bigger so it's easier to see. And you begin in the entrance, and from the entrance you basically have to find the 4 people which are randomly located throughout the map. In this case, I show the exact location, so if players get lost, they can look at the guide after that. And this guide also shows the exact locations of the fires of both the first floor, the second floor, and the warehouse. And I'll just, I won't go through all of this because it takes time, but you can toggle your flashlight and look at your odometer, and there's a certain amount of times you have to look at it to get full points. And let's say that I want to rescue the first person which is close by. I can use the firefighter method, and then I have to carry the casualty to the main entrance where I begin. And I have to do all of that while also keeping of being aware of the fires, of the temperature, and the time that I have left in case of oxygen. So if you do all of that, you will be awarded with the Volunteer of the Year award. And similarly, it will be for the landslide and flood scenarios in the level 3. And to get to them also in here, I'll showcase, for example, the landslide level as well, which is, in this case, you are in your house and there's a weather alert and you have to look for signs and respond to them accordingly. So so this is preparation for the emergency scenario, and you have to go through the correct steps. In this case, I will on the mobile it works correctly, but in here I have to load it separately. I'll just just load it separately. That's not a big on mobile. Everything works. It's just artifacts of the program that I'm using. In here also we start with an animation. We can read the text that there's an alert, weather alert, and we have to start the preparations for the landslide, and we have to check the emergency plan. And so there's this environment of your house. You can move freely about here. We have waypoints to indicate where we have to go. In here, this is 2-story building. So there are some certain steps we have to take, and we can check those steps by looking at the emergency plan, which is located in this part. So you can read all of the steps that you have to take, and you will have to do all of these steps to basically complete the level successfully. So in this case, yes, okay, we start gathering emergency supplies as is number 1. And for example, we go to the garage and we have to select which of the items we want. In this case, which do we not need in the emergency supply. So bicycle is too big, we cannot take it with us, and so on. And you just move through all of those steps until you successfully complete this level as well. The second level in here will be after you already gathered your emergency supplies, you will have to go to the meeting area. And on your way, you have to help some people who are stuck or not aware that they have to go to the assembly area. So first you have to choose the correct path. We have a topographical map, and because this is a landslide scenario, it's preferable that we don't move through the this heavily the area which is a lot of slopes in this area. So we have to go through the area which doesn't contain so much slopes to be safer. And on our way, we will see certain people here which we have to help. For example, a person who is in a wheelchair, and we can approach them and help them, direct them towards the assembly area. And there are more people here. All of them are indicated by the waypoint. And once you go through all that, of course, you can choose not to as well, but you will not get enough points to advance to the next level. You can go to the through the safe path, for example, to the assembly area, and then after loading, the assembly area itself will be shown. And let's say that I decide to mix with the crowd and not inform the person, and it will tell me that, yes, it's partially completed because we reached it, but we don't have enough score to move to the next level. And the third scenario will be dealing with, so the third level, I mean, we'll be dealing with helping an injured person as a part of the volunteering team. So you can participate in the search and rescue efforts, as well as then the planning of the mitigation side. So first we have to do the rescue efforts and go to the person. And we'll be asked several questions how we can help this person. So what are the appropriate steps to take, what to keep aware during a landslide in this case. Okay, so safe area for the landslide, and we choose between the pictures. And I'll just randomly choose through those because it's like just for a demonstration. And after successfully rescuing the person or not, we will be able to participate also in the mitigation, where we'll be asked several questions. So in here we are asked questions of what are the first steps in assessing the landslide risk, and we can participate. And if our answers are correct, we will get the award for the Volunteer of the Year, because we're able to go through the entire process of this emergency successfully. And for the flood, it's very similar. The flood scenario, I'll show the third part. The third level, because the first and second part are very similar to the landslide one. It's preparation for the emergency and then helping people gather to the assembly area. And the third part is different because this the environment is completely different during this flood scenario. We can see that. So yeah, okay, we get our gear, and if we look around, we can see that this is a town and it has different levels of elevation, and we are somewhere in the middle currently, and we can see that the lower parts of this town are already covered in water, and we have to help one of the persons, which you can see from here. It's very who is drowning, and we have to participate in the rescue efforts. So if we go there with the emergency crew, we can move to this person in this boat, and then we'll have to answer the questions correctly to rescue this person. And the questions are, for example, in this case, so who in the boat, which people should bring this person into the boat so it doesn't tip over? What do you give? So in life jacket and snorkel, and what members from the top of the boat should rescue this person so it doesn't tip over. And we know that, for example, on the left side, it's preferable that they do it. How can you give artificial respiration, and so on. And after that, we can bring this person back. And we can see the process of bringing this back. And after that, we'll also answer some other questions. And if we do all of that successfully in here, we'll also get the Volunteer of the Year award. Now, as I said, all of this is available on mobile. It will be available on both platforms. And if there's any questions regarding this, you can consult the guide document, where it is very detailedly written how you can go through all of the process, getting maximum points. So yeah, otherwise, the only thing that is required is you just load the game, download the game, load the game, choose your preferred language, and just go through it. And if you do everything successfully, you will have a basic knowledge of the entire process of preparation, going to the meeting area, and rescue and mitigation. So yeah, I will conclude the game showcase now.
Okay, thank you very much, Vasily. And I hope that this presentation and the previous ones have triggered your motivation or your curiosity to see what we have developed, and also to send us your comments or any other observations you may have about what we have done. Just to continue on the line of what we have done within the project and what we are still doing, because the project ends at the end of December. Try to share my screen again. Our next steps are, of course, we are still finalizing and revising the the app, the Ready4Disaster app, and we are still revising some elements of the app. At the moment, the mobile app can be downloaded from Google Play, and will be soon ready also it is ready for Android, and it will also soon be ready for iOS. I think it is a question of days by now. As for our next steps, we will be organizing, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so as a next step, we will be organizing a second international webinar, which will be hosted by GTU. So please follow us on our Facebook channels, Instagram, or also on our project website, so that you can be informed. And if you're interested in following up on the second international webinar, you can still participate. We will also have a final conference in Gebze in Turkey, again on 20th and 21st of November. So again, please stay tuned, and you will get information if you would like to participate also there. And of course, as I said, we will be finalizing all our products in project languages, so in English, Turkish, Greek, Italian, and Georgian. I would also like to ask you for final help. We would like you to evaluate today's sessions through this questionnaire. So I am showing you a QR code. You have a link, and we will also be sending a link via email. So please fill in this survey, as this helps us out also to organize the next webinar and our next sessions, also our final conference, so that we can make these elements more interesting, and it could help us all. So just as a wrap up, back to all of us together. Sorry, technology is a bit slow this morning. Just as a wrap up, I think we have had a good overall revision of our future, basically, from Mark Zibish from EURAC. And I believe that from what we have all understood, that climate change and climate impact is really having a good part on us. Basically, we need to start acting, well, not start, but we need to continue acting from the governance level down to civil protection, to volunteers, to civil citizens. So everyone needs to be raising their awareness on the different aspects and see how they can act in order to, of course, we cannot avoid what we are doing to the environment, but maybe we can slow down different things. So I think this is our major takeaway, and one of the other major takeaways we can take from today's session is that as an educational community, we still can continue working and developing skills, knowledge of people, and we can still continue to make learning fun also in these situations. I don't know if anyone has any questions also for the project team. No, maybe we can. You can turn your cameras on so we can take a picture if possible, if you agree, or whoever wants to take a picture can turn their cameras on. We will take a picture, and again, then I will show the QR code or the link for the evaluation questionnaire. So once again, I stress the importance of the evaluation questionnaire as it helps us out in this project. So actually, I see that people have abandoned the meeting rather than turning on their cameras, so they don't want pictures taken. Tashin, will you take the picture?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I did something. Do you see?
Okay, so smile for a few seconds.
Is it okay like this?
Are you okay?
Okay. Searching for some settings.
Have you managed?
Okay, I take one more.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much. I don't know, I don't see any hands raising. I don't see anything. I hope that Monica and other colleagues from Valencia are doing well and recovering. I think there's a lot of work there to do, and it's not a very nice issue to be coped with, but we are all with you, and stay strong. So I will, have you managed all to get the QR code or the link? I will show it to you again. And thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Είμαστε, ας πούμε, συντονιστές, ας μείνουμε λίγα ακόμα.
Ναι, εντάξει, δεν χρειάζεται να το καθίσαμε τόση ώρα τώρα να